The Malaysian military has reportedly tracked the missing jetliner by radar over the Malacca Strait.
An underwater drone descends into the black abyss of the southern Indian Ocean, miles beneath the waves, into a search zone so remote it is less understood than the surface of the moon. It is hunting the wreckage of the airliner that vanished with 239 people aboard and was never found.
The Boeing 777 apparently vanished 1 hour after taking off from Kuala Lumpur for Beijing on Saturday. Since then, there has been no confirmed trace of the aircraft or the 239 people on board.
What its sonar maps in that darkness is staggering. Drowned mountain ranges, ravines plunging into nothing, even century-old shipwrecks lost to history. Yet, in all of it, the one thing everyone was certain lay below is impossibly hauntingly absent. This is what the machines truly recorded down there. The last good night. But to understand how a machine ended up crawling the bottom of the ocean, looking for a Boeing, and why what it found still keeps people up at night, you have to go back to the last ordinary night this plane ever had. Once you see how quietly it all began, the silence that follows hits so much harder. It is just past midnight on the 8th of March, 2014, and at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, Malaysia Airlines, Flight 370 is loading up for what should be a forgettable overnight hop to Beijing. The aircraft is a Boeing 777-200ER, a workhorse of the skies that had been flying safely for around 12 years. Nothing about the machine or the schedule hints at what is coming. In the cockpit sits Captain Zaharieh Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, one of the most experienced pilots in the airline, with more than 18,000 hours in the air. Beside him is First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, just 27. For Farik, this flight is a kind of graduation, a training run toward full certification on this aircraft, and he does not know it will be his last. Behind them, 10 flight attendants move quietly through the cabin, looking after 227 passengers, 5 of them small children. Most of the travelers are Chinese nationals heading home, but the manifest reads like a snapshot of the whole planet. Malaysians, Indonesians, Australians, Indians, French, Americans, Iranians, Ukrainians, Canadians, and more, all of them expecting to wake up in Beijing. At 41 minutes past midnight, the 777 rolls down the runway, lifts into the black sky, and turns northeast over the South China Sea. It climbs to a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and the crew checks in with air traffic control to report that everything is normal, and for now, everything is. Then comes the moment that would haunt investigators for the next decade. As the plane approaches the boundary where Malaysian airspace hands off to Vietnam, a controller radios a routine good night, and the captain answers calmly with the standard sign-off, Malaysian 370. Those are the last words anyone on the ground will ever hear from that flight. Seconds later, the plane's transponder goes dark. The ghost on the radar. The transponder broadcasts a plane's identity, altitude, and position to everyone watching below. So, when it switches off, Flight 370 effectively becomes a ghost. Controllers watch the little labeled dot simply wink out of existence. No mayday, no distress call, no warning about weather or trouble on board. One moment the flight is there, and the next it is gone. But here is the thing that makes my skin crawl. The plane itself has not gone anywhere. It is still flying. Around 1:30 in the morning, military radar picks up an unidentified aircraft doing something that makes no sense at all. The plane has turned completely around. Instead of continuing toward Beijing, it doubles back, cutting southwest across the Malay Peninsula, and then banks again to the northwest, out over the Strait of Malacca. Someone, or something, is steering this aircraft deliberately away from every place it is supposed to be. Is the crew fighting an emergency? Has someone taken control of the plane? A pilot on another aircraft is asked to try raising Flight 370 on an emergency frequency, and he makes brief contact, but there are no clear words on the other end, only mumbling and a wash of static, and then nothing. At 22 minutes past 2 in the morning, over the deep and lonely waters of the Andaman Sea, military radar loses the plane for good. The blip fades, and this time, it does not come back. For hours, almost no one outside a few radar rooms understands how serious this is. It is not until 40 minutes later that controllers notify Malaysia Airlines that the flight is missing, and as dawn breaks, a frantic search spins up across the South China Sea and the Gulf of Thailand, the last places the plane was known to be. Ships and aircraft comb the water. They find nothing because the plane is not there. It never was. If a modern airliner vanishing into thin air is as hard for you to sit with as it was for the people running this search, do me a favor and hit subscribe before we go on, because from here the hunt is about to move into one of the most remote and unforgiving places anywhere on Earth, into the darkness where those robotic drones are waiting. In the days that follow, sightings pour in from everywhere. Fishermen, oil rig workers, and islanders across the region describe a low-flying plane, flames in the night sky, an aircraft plunging toward the sea. A worker on an oil platform reports a burning object in the early morning dark. Indonesian fishermen describe a plane going down near the straits. Months later, a British woman sailing across the Indian Ocean says she saw an aircraft on fire. None of it can be confirmed, and much of it contradicts the hard data. Yet each account deepens the feeling that something terrible and inexplicable has happened, and that the truth is drifting further out of reach by the hour. The signal from nowhere. Then the investigation takes the turn that changes everything, and this is the part almost no one saw coming. Engineers discovered that the plane had quietly kept talking to a satellite long after it vanished from radar. Every hour or so, an automatic system aboard the 777 exchanged a faint electronic handshake with a satellite operated by a company called Inmarsat. These were not messages with words or coordinates. They were more like a heartbeat, and they proved one stunning thing. The plane kept flying for around 6 more hours after it disappeared. For 6 hours, a jetliner full of people flew on across the open ocean, unseen by anyone in the world. By reading the timing and angle of those handshakes, investigators drew 2 enormous arcs across the map, and Flight 370 had to be somewhere along one. One arc swept north, from Southeast Asia up towards Central Asia. The other swept south, deep into the empty Indian Ocean, southwest of Australia. The northern path got ruled out fast, because to fly that way, the plane would have crossed airspace bristling with military radar in country after country, and none had caught an unknown jet. That left the south, an arc pointing straight towards some of the loneliest water on the planet. On the 24th of March, 2014, the Prime Minister of Malaysia stood before the world and delivered the conclusion no one wanted to hear. Based on that final satellite data, analyzed with Inmarsat and British accident investigators, the flight's last position was over the southern Indian Ocean, in a place so vast and so far from land that there was nowhere the plane could possibly have landed. The meaning was unbearable, and it was clear. Flight 370 and everyone aboard had come down in the sea. This is where the real hunt began, and where our story returns to that robotic drone sinking alone into the dark. Because what happened next, on the floor of the southern Indian Ocean, is the part almost nobody talks about. The search in the abyss. The mission to find Flight 370 became the most expensive search in the history of aviation, and the problem was brutal. The most likely crash zone lay well over 1,000 miles from the nearest coastline, above a seabed that had never been properly mapped, in places nearly 4 miles deep. The first real spark of hope came on the 6th of April, 2014. An Australian ship trailing a special listening device across the search zone, around 1,200 miles northwest of Perth, picked up a faint, rhythmic pinging. It sounded exactly like the signal from an aircraft's underwater locator beacon, the little device attached to the black boxes that record a plane's final moments. And the location roughly matched the Inmarsat data. But a clock was ticking because that beacon's battery only lasts about a month, and time was nearly gone. To chase the sound, the team sent down an underwater drone, an autonomous robotic submarine built to dive to the seafloor and map it with sonar. This was the machine sweeping through the darkness in total isolation, running mission after mission across the patch of ocean where the pings had been heard, scanning the abyssal plain in fine detail. And what it recorded became one of the most haunting parts of this story. The drone mapped a hidden underwater world no human had ever seen, a drowned landscape of undersea mountains, cliffs, and ravines plunging into blackness. It captured the shape of the deep in stunning resolution. But of Flight 370, of the wreckage everyone was so certain lay below, it found absolutely nothing. Not a fragment, not a seat, not a single piece of the plane. Picture what that meant for the crew on that ship. They had staked the whole investigation on a sound in the deep, sent a machine miles down to chase it, and watched the sonar paint an alien world with the one shape they needed nowhere in it. In time, investigators concluded the pings had probably never come from the plane at all, and were possibly just noise generated by the search equipment itself. The single most promising lead in the whole search had led a robotic drone straight to an empty stretch of seabed. Still, no one gave up. Sonar-equipped drones kept combing the southern arc through the middle of 2015, recording thousands of square miles of uncharted ocean floor. And here is where it gets strange, because in the process they stumbled onto things no one went looking for, including the wrecks of 19th century ships lost for over a century, their ghostly outlines rising out of the sonar returns. The machines were rewriting the map of the deep ocean itself. They just could not find the one thing they had been sent to find. Then, when the ocean refused to give up the plane began, piece by piece, to come to the world. The debris that drifted home. On the 29th of July, 2015, on a beach on the French island of Réunion, a cleanup worker found a barnacle-crusted slab of metal in the surf. It was a flaperon, a control surface from the trailing edge of a wing, and it was later confirmed to belong to Flight 370. What made it staggering was the distance, because Réunion sits roughly 2,300 miles west of where the searchers had been looking. The ocean had carried this piece of the plane across half a hemisphere. Over the next year and a half, more fragments washed ashore along the coastlines of Africa, in Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, Madagascar, and Mauritius. Investigators cataloged around 24 pieces thought to belong to the aircraft. A few were confirmed beyond doubt, and 2 of them came from inside the cabin, which told a grim story on its own. The plane had not simply slipped beneath the waves in one piece. At some point, it had broken apart. The condition of those recovered wing parts offered a chilling clue about the plane's final seconds. The damage suggested the aircraft had not been gently ditched by someone at the controls. Instead, it looked as though Flight 370 had struck the ocean at high speed, in a steep dive, tearing itself apart on impact. The official searches wound down. Malaysia, Australia, and China suspended their joint effort in January 2017. An American company, Ocean Infinity, secured permission to keep hunting with its own fleet of advanced underwater drones, and searched on until the middle of 2018, before that effort too was called off. A Malaysian government report released that year leaned toward an unsettling possibility that the plane's course had most likely been changed deliberately, by hand, rather than by any accidental failure. But if someone really did turn that plane, then the question that has tormented the world ever since is brutally simple: who and why? The theories in the dark. In the absence of answers, the theories multiplied, and one of the first grew from a disturbing detail. 2 passengers had boarded Flight 370, using stolen passports, one Austrian and one Italian, both reported missing in Thailand in the years before. For a while, it looked like the thread that might unravel everything, but the truth was far more human than sinister. The 2 travelers were young Iranian men, 19 and 29, who had entered Malaysia legally and were almost certainly trying to reach Europe to seek asylum, not to carry out an attack. And even the head of Interpol signaled early on that this did not appear to be terrorism. Exhaustive background checks by American, Malaysian, and Chinese investigators reached the same quiet conclusion about everyone aboard. Nothing linked any passenger to violence or terror. So, attention turned almost inevitably to the 2 men in the cockpit. The captain became the central focus. Investigators interviewed well over 100 people, searched his home, and pored over his life for a motive. And what they found sent a chill through the investigation, because on a flight simulator, Zahari kept at home, specialists recovered a deleted flight path, a route running south into the remote Indian Ocean, and ending near a lonely stretch of sea, eerily similar to where Flight 370 is believed to have gone down. To some, that was the smoking gun, but others pointed out that a simulator enthusiast who flies thousands of routes might have tried such a path among countless others. Reports of personal strain in his life circulated widely, and just as quickly, his wife, friends, and colleagues pushed back, describing a man far too devoted to his family and career to do something so unthinkable. Despite a full analysis by the FBI alongside the Malaysian police, no hard evidence ever tied him to a deliberate act. The co-pilot drew scrutiny too. As the plane crossed low over the Malaysian coast, his cell phone briefly connected to a tower on the ground, as if reaching out for a signal before the connection dropped away. Who he might have been trying to reach, if anyone, was never made public. Yet Fareeq's life pointed away from tragedy, not toward it. He was a young man proud of his career, by every account looking forward, not searching for a way out. There were wilder ideas too. Some imagined the plane had been commandeered by intelligence agents and hidden away in a remote corner of Central Asia. Others clung to the reports that the passengers' phones seemed to ring when desperate families called, and let themselves wonder if their loved ones might still be alive. Telecom experts explained that a ringing tone does not mean a phone has been reached. It only means the network is searching for a device it may never find. The hope those ringing phones offered was, heartbreakingly, an illusion. And that silence points to perhaps the strangest fact of all, the one I keep coming back to. In an age when nearly everyone carries a phone, not a single person aboard Flight 37 sent a message, made a call, or posted anything after the plane turned around. Part of the answer may lie in the aircraft's bizarre behavior after it went dark, because military radar suggested the plane climbed to an extreme altitude of around 45,000 feet, then dropped sharply, then climbed again. At heights like that, sealed off far above any cell tower, no phone on board would have found a signal to reach the world below. But whether that was an accident or something colder, no one can tell you for certain. What the deep still holds. So, a decade on, this is where the mystery sits. The most advanced underwater drones ever built swept a patch of ocean the size of a small country and recorded a hidden world of drowned mountains and forgotten shipwrecks, yet never found the plane they were sent for. The sea returned only scattered fragments, carried thousands of miles by the current, and the two men entrusted with the flight left behind nothing but questions. Somewhere on the floor of the southern Indian Ocean, in a darkness that has never known a single ray of light, the answer is almost certainly still waiting. The machines have been down there. They have recorded wonders no one expected. They have simply not yet recorded the one thing the world has been aching to find for more than 10 years. If this deep dive pulled you in, do me a favor and tap that subscribe button so the next investigation finds its way to you. And I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments, because after everything the search has uncovered and everything it somehow has not, what do you believe really happened to Flight 370? Drop your theory below.